Alrighty, for those of you that don't know me, and I think everybody does, my name is Joni Kearn. I have a little kind of independent business on the side called Freedom Financial. Do a lot of this kind of stuff, and teaching really is my focus, and it really is my passion. So, this month's topic, and remind me, we have to talk about next month at the end of this. But this month's topic is, how long should I keep my records? Terry and I were talking, I don't know if anybody is like me, but when you get around to cleaning out your file cabinet, it's only because you can't get one more piece of paper in it. And you start looking through it and you go, why do I have an electric bill from 1987? So what started out as this simple one page grew into, I don't have any idea, because I found some really, really good information and guidelines. So the first page I'm going to talk about is just kind of a basic overview. What do I need to keep and what do I need to throw? Because again, if you guys are anything like me, you never know quite what you can get rid of. So you end up keeping things, and some things for longer than you should. And I have learned through experience, not all of which was good, that there are some things I just will never throw away. So in all of this, I kind of put together my own kind of guideline and then added some other people's guidelines to it. 1 year is the accepted amount of time that you keep things like utility bills, credit card statements, bank account statements, investment statements, anything like that. You actually, like insurance declaration pages, IRA statements, you can get rid of the old one when the new one comes. Insurance deck pages, my insurance stuff, I got no problem. Once I get the new one, if I haven't changed companies, I just get rid of the old one. Because I'm assuming it's coming the same, and I take a quick glance through it and get the things out of it that I need, hopefully before I get a ticket for not having my insurance card in my car. That has never happened. So those kinds of things you could get rid of. I tend to keep my investment statements long after, because sometimes I like to look historically and see how they've done, or I want to look back and see, you know, where my shares are, where I started. So I do tend to keep those longer. They also tend to be just single or double pages, so it's a little bit easier to put in than my entire insurance package, you know, that you get. Mortgage deeds and satisfactions forever. If you own the house and up to 7 years beyond owning the house, you keep all of those. And I'll tell you a short story. Years ago, in one of my past lives, when I was writing mortgages, there was a mortgage on a title that was still open, never showed as satisfied. It was 35 years old. It was a little tiny, like $4,000 mortgage from a local bank this guy had gotten, but it had never been satisfied. You wouldn't believe the hoops we had to jump because he didn't have the paperwork. It was 35 years ago. So after that, I started telling everybody, any deeds, any satisfactions, anything you get, put it in the file with your appraisal. I have a file, it's mortgage paperwork. It's not my mortgage statements, it's everything else. It's my copies of the deeds, it's the copies of my mortgages, the liens, the satisfactions, everything I've got is in one file. You have to keep it for tax purposes, just in case the IRS feels like catching up with you, for 7 years beyond when you sell your house. Just saying. Even if you transfer it or put it into a trust, hang on to it. Property taxes go with your income taxes. And those I hang on to for a minimum of 7 years. We'll get there. State and federal income taxes. A good rule of thumb is 7 years. If you look at irs.gov, they go, well, it's 1 if you do this, and it's 3 if you do this, and it's 7 if you filed fraudulent taxes. The other thing they said on there, which I thought was really, really wise, was they said, if you have not filed taxes, you need to keep those for 7 years. Doesn't it? So if you're really, really naughty, you should probably keep them forever. I did clean out my filing cabinet. If you're self-employed, if you have any kind of a side business, you have to keep them longer. I cleaned out my filing cabinet, destroyed everything back 7 years. I'm perfectly safe. Since then, I have decided that I'm going to scan anything beyond probably 7 years onto a disc. 2 discs. One goes in my safe or safety deposit box. One is accessible at home, just in case. Because you just never know with the IRS. And because they can find your bank account and take whatever they want legally, yeah, you don't mess with the IRS. Collections. If you have had a collection and it has been paid, you make sure that you keep a copy of the check you paid it with. You never pay a collection with cash. Never, ever, ever, ever. Keep a copy of the check that you've paid it off with. I have made them give me final statements. This is what you owe. And they'll say, yeah, we don't do that. Yeah, then you're not going to get paid. And when they call me a week later, I'll say, I'm still waiting for that final statement. They have always sent it to me. I attach a copy of my check because I can get back records from the bank. I attach a copy of my check, my carbon copy thingy, to the payoff, and I keep it forever. Why do I do that? Because years and years ago, when John and I were first starting out, and we had $40,000 in collection and no idea how we were going to ever pay them off, 2 years, 2 weeks it took us. We had a bunch of collections, of course, and I was paying them off one by one. And we go to buy a house, and what happens? The guy takes a look at my credit. He said, we're never going to get you financing. I said, why? He said, you've got a bunch of collections. I took out my file folder, and I said, name them. And he said, well, there's this one. I said, there it is. Well, there's this one. There it is. There's this one. There it is. So we buy the house, and everything is fine and good, and I decide I can get rid of all of those. Yeah, they're like ghosts. They come and go. So one year they weren't on my credit bureau, and the next year they were, and then they would disappear, and then they would come back. I learned pretty quickly to keep all of that. I will keep them forever. Collection companies, anybody can report anything on your credit bureau they feel like, and they like to punish us, even if they've gotten their money. Car maintenance records for as long as you own the car. Probably would keep it a little bit longer. When you sell the car, it's always a good idea to give them the maintenance records, because if they have any trouble with it and they bring it to a mechanic, it's easy for them to say, here is what has been done. It also is handy for warranties. If you buy a car with a 100,000 mile warranty and you have your oil change somewhere else because it's like 25% of the cost, you need to keep records of that so that if you ever have any warranty trouble, you can bring that. Because if you can't prove it's been done, they're not going to fulfill the warranty, because maintenance is something that is required with most of those warranties. Pet records, for as long as they're in your household, you need to keep them, because if your pet, whether it's a long-haired barn cat or a dog or a rat, I've had rats, they're great. you want to keep them because if they ever need to go and you need to switch vets for whatever reason, then you have all of their records right there. So if you adopt a pet, it comes with what health records they have, and that again is something that you hang on to forever. Wills and trusts, the rule of thumb is that until you write a new one, if you amend a will or a trust, which you can do with a little amendment, then you keep the amendment with the original will. If you decide to trash the original will and just start over because you don't like anybody you left anything to, that has never happened, then you can get rid of the old one. That's the rule of thumb. What would I do? I'd hang on. A will is like 5 or 6 pages. You review it once a year. You don't rewrite them or amend them every year. I will make room in my file cabinet just to hang on to them because I just think it's a fairly good idea, because if somebody has an old copy of the will, then, I know my attorney has it. But especially if we write them ourselves, you can say, yeah, this was it. This is, of course, by then you're dead, so you don't really care. But somebody who loves you will care. And it's just nice because somebody can come back and say, well, they left me this. And if there is the old copy and the new copy, yes, they did. And then they decided they didn't like you. So they changed, you know what I mean? It just is, it's always a better, there is nothing worse than needing to produce a document and not having any idea where it is because you kept it. Because you put it in a safe place. Can anyone find their safe places? Because I got to put it in an unsafe place or I'll never see it again. Huh?
Nobody else will.
That might be a good idea. Or you have gotten rid of it and now you have to try to scramble to either figure out if there's a copy of it somewhere or try to get, and by then the attorney you wrote that will with 37 years ago, he was 93 at the time, he's now dead. And the office has been, and who knows where the records are. I needed to go back, health records are the same way, we're getting to that next. I was in the hospital when I was 18 months old. That's been, 19 and a half years ago. In my hometown of Aiken, Minnesota, which is barely a blip on the map. And for some reason, I had mentioned that on medical history, and they said, yeah, we need a copy of that. Okay, this was in 1965. Computers weren't born yet. Everything was paper. So I called up the hospital expecting them to go, you're really funny. And she said, you know what? We've got everything in a storage room. Darned if they didn't happen to have, and it took me about 48 hours to get it, a paper copy of the records of me being in the hospital in 1965. Would I ever expect that to happen again? No. Because those rooms burned, the records are destroyed, they were put on, what did it used to be called? Microfiche. Those things, I don't know if they make tools.
They can't find it even when they put it on something.
So medical records are something else that you just hang on to forever. But that's page 2. I printed this out. A gal in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who does she's a professional organizer with the ACE organizing in Southampton, Pennsylvania. It's on the next page. I gave her credit. She has a website. There was just so much good information in here and things that I was not necessarily aware of that I thought I would just copy it and print it for you. It's how long do I need to keep explanations of benefits from Medicare and health insurance companies. And as a professional organizer, she went through, and she said, here's what I would say, and I'm just going to kind of this is all pretty self-explanatory. My rule of thumb with this is your doctors all have records. That doesn't mean they're not going to lose them or that they're not going to be complete. So she said things like bills, you can staple those onto the actual medical records that you get, which I think it's a good idea to get that kind of stuff. We get with John, because he's at the doctor so much, we get like synopsis of what they did, especially with his lung functions. I do have those back. He has this done once every 3 or 6 months, depending on how he's doing. Good morning. And I do keep those forever because I like to take a look at them and go back and see. Then I can decide. And then if I have questions on what this particular thing was, then I can ask a question, or I can keep my own eye on it. And I just like having that kind of, I like having that ability, because it means that I'm not just trusting what somebody else is. Yeah, he's fine, he's about the same. Well, this number is way down, you know, kind of deal. So you should always keep bills long enough to be able to compare them to any medical service records that you get, just to make sure that there aren't duplications. I did a medical bill thing here about a year ago, and it's something like 85% of the bills have errors on them. It's just an amazing number to me. So you really do want to take a look through them. If I have a problem with a bill that I received for any reason, or if I'm disputing that amount, you know, you make notes on it, that's something I'm going to keep forever. Okay? Pharmacy records, if you claim any of your doctor bills, your prescriptions on your taxes at the end of the year, those have to be kept. Those would stay with my taxes. So after 7 years, I would scan the whole mess and I would put them on a disc. But until then, I keep all of the receipts that I use on my taxes. I just keep it all, and it goes in an envelope. My tax preparer just has this big envelope. She slips my taxes in. Everything goes in there, and I just keep the whole mess for 7 years. I just, because of experiences with trying to find documents or having to pay something twice because I didn't have the correct documentation, I just have tended to be more safe than sorry. Medical EOBs, which is explanations of benefits, they're useful for creating or recreating a health history for yourself or someone. If you take over healthcare, if you're a healthcare power of attorney for a spouse or for a parent or for a child or sister, it doesn't matter. It is really nice to have all of those records, because then you are familiar with everything that has happened. Because when you're stepping in as healthcare power of attorney, it means that something has happened and they need your help. So it's nice to have all of those records you can look through. Then when you're talking to doctors, you're prepared. You have the right questions. You have the information. So if they're saying one thing and you're thinking another, at least you have the basis upon which to say this. Then I'm not understanding what this information is. Normal health, they say to keep your explanations of benefits for a year. As they come in, you match the related items together. So if you're going for a regular physical and everything comes out right, you know, all your blood work and stuff, then they're saying keep everything together for a year, and after that you can trash it. Again, this is what she says. She's a professional. She's better than I am. I would keep them longer than that. I just have a tendency. I have a file that says doctor bills, and I just have a tendency to put them in there. And that way I can go back for anything that I want to go back for. Okay? And it's a simple, right now I have Theta Care saying that, because I am blessed, because John is 100% disabled, that's not the blessing, I am able to get CHAMP VA, which is medical benefits for spouses of 100% disabled vets. Well, I have CHAMP VA refusing to pay a doctor's bill from I don't know when, because they're saying that I had different insurance or something. So is that where having all of those records comes in really handy? And this is more than a year ago. So that's one of those times where it isn't a matter of proving that I paid it. It's a matter of going back and saying this is what the history is. It says if you don't qualify for the medical tax deduction, medical bills have been paid in full by you and all providers. You're no longer doctoring for the condition. You can safely shred last year's. If it is a chronic illness, they say to keep them for another year or up to 5 years or better after. You know, if somebody is dealing with diabetes, which tends to be progressive, or if somebody has cancer, you know, you keep those medical records for up to 5 years after. I personally, life insurance's guidelines is you are not considered cancer-free until you've been in remission for 10 years. That is how long I would keep all of the records from the cancer and from all of the 10 years following, because life insurance is going to want them. So that's and that isn't the guideline they use, but it would be the guideline I would follow. So you keep a current file close at hand for this year's. At the end of the year, you can sort them so that you can put in last year's, and you can keep all of those, and you can keep them according to the timeline. Year, yeah, I'm good with that. Month, date, not necessarily so good with that kind of stuff. They just kind of go into the file, but at least I know where I'm looking. And I have separate files for John and I, because mine is this thin and his is like this. I literally have his lung x-rays from 1987 when he was diagnosed with pleural fibrosis and asbestos effusion. I just think they're kind of cool that I have x-rays. And you know, every few years I can pull them out and I can hold them up to the sunlight and I can actually look at what his lungs are. And then when I see the new x-rays at the doctor's office, because it's all via computer now, I can actually see what has gone on and how much sicker he has become. So, and again, letter A here says for 5 years after the health condition, the serious health condition is cleared up. For 7 years, if you've claimed the medical deduction, again, that's IRS. Indefinitely if the person is chronically ill, which falls into John because he is chronically ill. This is never going to get any better. Then this would be a good time to take care of everything. So, and the final note, don't panic if you need something and you haven't kept them. All health insurers keep them. Good luck getting them. Unless you were in the hospital in Aiken, Minnesota in 1965, and then they have paper records. It was so cool to see like doctors like handwriting and the nurses, and you know, because I was 18 months old, so I don't remember it very well. So then I went on to something called USA.gov, and it sorted some things out, and I agree with like 99% of this, so I thought it was a really, really good guideline. There are things that you need to keep in your safe deposit box. I have one of those little home safes, which if it's in the middle of the house fire is not going to do it a whole lot of good. It's fire safe up to however many degrees. Talk to a lot of people that say, yeah, it's great on the advertisement, not so good in a house fire. If you keep it lower level corner or on an outside wall, it's a whole lot more likely to survive a fire because it won't get as hot. So that is one rule of thumb I use. There are things that I keep in that, and then there are things that you keep in a safe deposit box. We have talked about that here. You need duplicates or triplicates of things like wills. One needs to be accessible either in a file cabinet or in a home safe. You know, there's some jewelry that's particularly precious to you that you might want to keep in a home safe unless you take it out to wear it. And then, you need duplicates of things like birth certificates. I think I've actually had in my lifetime to prove that I was born like 5 times, and call the hospital I was born in, which also but it's a bigger hospital. You have to pay for those. 20 years ago, you didn't have to pay. Now you do, and it's like $10. Yeah. I now have copies. So I have copies of mine. I have copies of John's. I have copies of John's kids, so that if the need ever comes, then I have it. And I have like the original stamped copy. And then everybody else, unless they have to have an original, gets a copy of that particular stamped copy, so I always have an original. Citizenship papers, marriage certificates, those need to be held on to forever. Adoption papers, divorce decrees, wills, death certificates, deeds, titles to automobiles, all of these kinds of household inventories we also have. In case of a fire, in case of a burglary, you need to have an inventory, not of your forks and spoons, unless they're silver, but of jewelry, of collectibles, of anything that has value that is going to need to be replaced. Your homeowner's insurance will cover, just automatically covers up to X amount, depending on the insurance, X amount of what your home insurance is. But there are some things that you need to schedule above and beyond that. You need, however, if your house burns down and you go to the insurance company, they will automatically give you money, but they will also say, what did you lose? Sofa. I think there was a chair in there. The refrigerator burned. How do you, in a situation like that, where everything is run by emotion, we always come back to this, don't we? Yeah. Once emotion takes over, logic leaves. There's not room for the two of them in your brain. So it's hard to come up with a list. And 5 years down the road, you're going to be looking for something that you inherited from your grandma, and you're going to go, well, I'll be darned, I forgot. So take an inventory, take pictures, especially of the things that are not replaceable, that need to have a value attached. So you need to have that inventory in a safe deposit box, again, a copy in your most important file at home, so that you're covered with all of your insurances for burglaries or fires or whatever else. Any important contracts that you have. That agreement between John and I that he cooks, that probably doesn't have to go in the safe deposit box. And in order to schedule any jewelry, it needs to be appraised. And, there's a guideline, depending on the insurance, there's a guideline as to how much it's worth, whether or not you should schedule it. Wedding engagement rings should probably be scheduled. Anything that you inherited, especially stuff that is no longer replaceable, you really need to take care of that stuff, because rings are really easy to walk off to. You have a party and somebody you don't know comes in, and I've heard that something like 80% of people that use another person's bathroom open up the medicine cabinet. I was like, really? I should do that sometime. So if you guys ever have me over to your house, I don't look in medicine cabinet. I just don't. It's amazing. It's amazing how stuff can get we had a car stolen. We were on vacation in Florida. We had some Christmas gifts in there. I had a ring in there. My husband's false teeth were in there. Everything was stolen. False teeth can be worth like $5,000. Yeah. Then they have the active file, which are things that you may have to look at. Tax receipts, unpaid bills, paid bill receipts, blah, blah, blah. Employment information. If you still have a job, they say keep your paychecks for a year and then you can trash them. So in that file where I used to have like 18 years of paychecks, I could give you what jobs I had from 1985. That wasn't necessary to hang on to any of those anymore. So unless you're going to be very, very famous, and all of that stuff will be able to be sold on eBay for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can probably toss them. Loan statements, payment books. Again, a lien release on a car is something that I would hang on to at least until the car is sold. I would be more likely to put that into my forever file. Humans run the world. Humans make mistakes. It's just that simple, so having something else is kind of handy. Items to discard: salary statements after checking and making sure that they're good on the W-2 form. And of course the W-2s go with your taxes if you have any of those. All of your 1099s go with your taxes. You have those forever, or 7 years, or forever if you haven't filed taxes. You have to keep those returns, remember. Canceled checks for cash or non-deductible expenses can be trashed. Bank statements after a year, I do trash those. Unless there's been something on there that I have disputed, I will get rid of everything but that particular carbon copy of the check in that particular bank statement. I hang on to those. It's cheaper than going to the bank and paying, and then of course I know that I have it. Expired warranties. Does everybody here have a warranty file that's like this thick?
I think I got rid of that freezer how many years ago? And I still have the freezer before. Warranty.
This is one of those files that I did look at it through, but the booklets and stuff stay in there. But this is one of those things that I went, wow, I hadn't thought of that. So that has to go on there now. Jay Leno, we all know who Jay Leno is. His parents, dad has now passed, but they live on the East Coast and they're very, very frugal, Depression era. And so Jay talks to his dad a couple of times a day. They were very close, and his dad says, my toilet seat broke, and I have a 20-year warranty. Jay said, Dad, just go buy one. No, I have a 20-year warranty. This is his favorite story. So he goes back, he flies back home, right? And he says, Dad, I'll be more than happy to buy you a new toilet seat. No, I found the paper. Pulls out the warranty, takes the toilet seat off. They bring it down to the same hardware store where he bought it 19 and a half years ago. Got a replacement. He said, I had a warranty. So I'm not sure I would go that far. But I sure do like hearing stories from people who love their parents that much. Coupons after the expiration date, they really don't do you any good after they've expired, just saying. And other records that are no longer needed, anything that just doesn't matter to you anymore, you've gotten rid of it. It's a receipt for a piece of clothes that you've had for 3 years, those kinds of things. A sofa that's already worn out. I mean, get rid of all of those receipts, because all they're going to do is clutter up, and then when you really do need something, it's that much more frustrating because you have to sort through all the stuff that you don't need.